When you're doing a talk, what is the best, most effective way to address an objection before someone in the audience says them out loud? Now, there are many ways to overcome an objection. Also, I always remember this principle that context shapes communication. Depending on the context of the talk, what happens before, how many times they saw you speak before. There's a lot of things that could influence how you overcome objection, but a good principle that I follow, that I teach all clients is this: the most effective way to overcome objection is by addressing, reframing the objection within a story. Why within a story? Here's why. When you tell a great story, you're going to create identification. Identification is a psychological process where the audience of 1, 2, 10, 100, identify himself, herself, or themselves with the character or characters of the story. When you have this identification, they go, oh, this is just like me, just like my brother, just like my mother, just like my dad. When you have this identification, a couple of things happen. You have less resistance and you have more connection. So you have this psychological transportation. Basically, they're in trance. They're not resisting your message so much. That's why when they're transported into this new reality, they're emotionally connected to the character, their experience, the story is the most effective way to address the objection, because they are not resisting. They're not counter-arguing against your facts. So we have a story, and then within the story, you want to address and reframe the meaning of the objection. Let me give a quick example. So one of my niches that I work with a lot, one of my clients in the health space is doing a presentation, and then in the end, their patient's got to come to the office, let's say 3 times a week for 3 months, for example. And a lot of people like thinking like, wow, there's a lot of time. That is a concern. Do I have to come to a practice 3 times a week for the next 3 months? It is a valid concern. So one of the ways to address and reframe the objection is to change the meaning. Addressing the objection is you bring the objection to awareness. Change the meaning is reframing the meaning. For example, you tell a story about someone who need help, but now was concerned about coming 3 times a week for 3 months. And then you can say something like, look, here's what I told her, and I'll tell you, you the audience, if I were to write a check for $10,000 every time you come here 3 times a week for the next 3 months, would you find a way? And usually the whole audience goes, of course. So then you can reframe and say something like, look, so it's a matter of you don't have the time to come, or you don't value your health enough to make a priority. Which one actually it is? And now people just like, they're like, oh yeah, if I would come for the money, then it's not the time, it's that I'm not valuing my health enough. And then you say, well, in that case, that person realized that the health is the most important asset, and therefore that person decided to come and follow through care. So that's how you address an objection within the story. Obviously, you want to make sure the story is powerful. And in my example here, I didn't tell the whole story, but I was spending time here explaining the mechanics of telling a story, addressing and reframing the meaning within the story, which is really powerful. If you want more tips on communication, public speaking, sales, and influence, make sure that you join us at our next Influencing from the Front program. Don't speak to inform, speak to transform.